Thank you all for coming today, and especially I'd like to thank our amazing panelists, moderators, and speakers. What do you say? Shall we meet here again? Same place, same time, say next Friday, and do it all over again? All right, we've saved a treat for you for last. For our final act, we have a very compelling closer. Justice Pat DeWine began his 6-year term on the Supreme Court of Ohio in January 2017. He is an excellent writer who is known for the quality and thoroughness of his legal opinions. His opinions reflect his strong belief in judicial restraint and his respect for the constitutional roles of the other co-equal branches of government. We in Ohio look the other way at the one grave misjudgment he has made in his life, attending that law school up north. He did graduate Order of the Coif honors, so we'll let it slide this time. As an undergraduate student at Miami University, he was a member of the varsity track and cross-country teams. He clerked for the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals for Judge David Nelson, and we're honored to have him offering closing remarks for what has been a very special conference today. Please join me in welcoming Justice Pat DeWine.
Thank you all very much. It's my honor to close what has been a great conference. I can't tell you how genuinely good it is to see all of you and to be with all of you, not on Zoom, but actually in person. I don't think any of us are ever going to take for granted again the kind of back of the room chit-chat, the in the hallway conversations. They're such a part of these events. And certainly, congratulations, Robert, on putting together a great conference. Congratulations to Lisa Ezel and everyone at the National Federalist Society and everyone at the state for making this what I think has really been a great conference. I think, Judge Rogers, your speech was fantastic. All the panels were great, so thank you all. It's kind of fun to look around this room. I counted, I think I have 9 clerks here, 9 either former, current, or future clerks here. And I know it's nothing like the number of bat shelter clerks in the room, but I still feel like I'm doing something pretty well in the hiring process to see that. I love, look, though, I know what you're all thinking. As soon as DeWine shuts up, the bar opens. So I'll try to keep this brief. But I do love being part of these events. To me, what makes the Federalist Society so great is its emphatic rejection of the notion that there's one orthodoxy of thought that we all must accept. Really, that's the idea that animates our Constitution. When our framers looked to history, they saw from their standpoint that the greatest threats to individual liberty had come from powerful central governments and sometimes from state-backed religious monoliths. So they wrote a Constitution that divided powers between the branches of government, between the states and the federal government, and they gave us a Bill of Rights that by its very first amendment guaranteed freedom of speech and freedom of religion. At their core, these constitutional freedoms have one thing in common: the protection of the individual's right not to go with the flow, the right to reason, to think, to argue, to debate, and come to one's own conclusions about what is right or wrong, what is true and untrue, and how one wants to order his or her life. Of course, as Judge Sutton always points out to us, a key part of our freedom-protecting constitutional order is that diffusion of power between states and the federal government. As a state Supreme Court, we further those interests by independently interpreting our Ohio Constitution based upon its own unique text, history, and tradition, not by simply acting in lockstep with the U.S. Supreme Court interpretations of similar federal provisions. And even when it comes to the U.S. Constitution, our duty is to apply our independent perspective until the United States Supreme Court tells us otherwise. I'm proud, for example, that last year, 4 members of the Ohio Supreme Court, and that's a majority, by the way, did something that I don't think a single federal circuit has done. We rejected the use of an interest balancing test, intermediate scrutiny, that relegated the Second Amendment to a second-class right. Instead, we said that laws that burden the Second Amendment must be evaluated based upon the history, text, and tradition of that amendment. As lawyers and judges, we devote our efforts to the legal arena. But increasingly, the greatest threats to freedom come not so much from government, sometimes from government, often, but also from powerful societal actors intent on imposing their own orthodoxy of thought. Take freedom of expression. If you look at precedent from the United States Supreme Court, you look at precedent from our court, at no point in our history have there been greater legal protections against government restrictions on speech. But at the same time, the actual ability of citizens to express themselves is increasingly under assault. You can do a lot of cool things when you're on the Ohio Supreme Court, but you can't overrule a judgment of the Facebook Court of Appeals. No question, as Justice Thomas reminded us recently, we're all going to have to grapple in coming years with how our legal doctrines apply in a world where the public square is increasingly being replaced by privately owned platforms. But we also have an obligation to defend the values that underlie our Constitution outside of the courtroom. When it comes to freedom of expression, it took a while to get things right. Despite the sweeping language of the First Amendment, its promise was not fully realized until really the 1960s when the United States Supreme Court read the amendment to afford broad protections to those who criticized the government. In doing so, the court embraced the marketplace of ideas metaphor that had been developed 4 decades earlier by Justices Holmes and Brandeis. As Holmes explained, when one is certain in their beliefs, then persecution of others for contrary opinions is perfectly logical. But when one realizes that time has upset many fighting faiths, one also realizes that ultimate good is better accomplished by the free trade of ideas. When the court adopted that conception, it acted in accord with really the prevailing views of other societal institutions, particularly academia and the news media. Today, though, it seems our judicial system is often on its own in insisting on the efficacy of allowing the unbridled expression of out-of-favor opinions. No one has a bigger stake, for example, than the media in the free exchange of ideas. But more and more, it seems even the media is less than comfortable with the implications of a true marketplace of ideas. Consider, for example, the New York Times editorial of June 25th, 1978. That was the day that the Nazis had planned to march in predominantly Jewish Skokie, Illinois. Here's what the Times editorial page wrote that day. I quote, "As for the Nazis, let them march. Nothing they will do or say is likely to win them the affection of any number of Americans. But the fact that they are permitted to rally confirms the strength of the constitutional government which they would, if they could, destroy." Now, is there anyone in this room that believes that the New York Times editorial board would have the courage to write those words today? Indeed, contrast that with what happened last summer at the Times when a New York Times opinion editor dared allow a United States senator's viewpoint, Tom Cotton's, to be published on the editorial page. The backlash that erupted, and mostly we read from younger, woke staffers of the New York Times, was so severe that that editor who dared to treat the opinion page, the place where you air divergent opinions, was forced to resign. And I think things are even worse when it comes to our universities and colleges. One need only pick up a newspaper, scroll through a few judicial opinions, just read one from the Sixth Circuit, or chat with a college student to realize how out of favor the marketplace of idea is in many of our academic institutions. A few years ago, I got invited to speak on Law Day to one of Ohio's most storied liberal arts colleges. I won't name it, but you can probably figure out which one. It's a place that has a history of dissent. It was a bastion of abolitionism dating from well back before the Civil War. I think so I gave my speech about First Amendment values to an audience that was respectful but decidedly skeptical. After I finished, it was time for questions. A professor raised his hand. Justice DeWine, you base much of what you say on the U.S. Constitution. That Constitution is premised on principles of Western liberalism, principles that at this point in our history have long since been firmly discredited. How can you continue to defend those ideas? Needless to say, I didn't share the professor's view of history, and I emphatically said so. But you do have to worry about the long-term implications for our First Amendment freedoms when important societal institutions increasingly reject the idea that truth is best reached through the free competition of ideas. Though the marketplace of ideas may be under attack, it is far superior to the imposition of some chosen orthodoxy from on high. The First Amendment, by its terms, applies only to government conduct. But the logic of the marketplace of ideas, the values that underlie our First Amendment, apply with equal force to private conduct, be it a social networking platform, academia, or a newspaper editorial page. I hope that our institutions will come to learn what our legal system has learned through time, that there's no guarantee that any one of us is right, so that it's worth putting up with voices we don't like in order to ensure we are able to say and to hear what we choose. To the extent they don't, however, it's going to be even more important that our courts continue to protect the right of unpopular voices to be heard. But in this age, it is also important what happens outside the courtroom. So let me just close by challenging all of you. Continue to fight for our constitutional values. Fight for them inside the courtroom, but also fight for them outside the courtroom. Thank you all very much. I think, well, I guess Lisa, you third? I think the bar is almost open, so it's been a great